Well, this is going to be a great interview, folks. I'm with a swimming friend, Carleen Ginter from Canada, but she's actually in Perth. And we're going to be talking about a whole range of things: health, fitness, swimming, leading your best life. But in particular, we're going to talk about pelvic floor exercises. I know it's going to raise your eyebrows, but Carleen's an expert in a whole range of things. So, Carleen, welcome aboard to this Leading Your Best Life episode.
Thanks, Leigh. So happy to be here.
Well, it's very hard swimming against you because you're so fast and you're getting faster and faster. I don't like it at all.
Well, you just got to follow the technique with the pelvis rolling.
You're bringing that in already, are you?
And you keep up.
Very funny, very funny. I'm working hard, mate. So look, Carleen, this episode and all the podcasts we talk about how do people lead their best life, and I know that's certainly part of your mission as to what you do each and every day. So let's start with your story. Where have you come from and what kind of drives Carleen Ginter?
Well, as you mentioned, I'm from Canada, so that's where I've come from. I've just been in Perth for 2 years, coming up on 2 years. So it's funny when you ask these questions, you really have to reflect on a lot of things and think about how you got to where you are today. And I really appreciate thinking like that, because sometimes you get so caught up in going forward that you don't think about where you are now and how lucky you are to be where you are. So yeah, and then all the things that got me to where I am, I guess mainly would be swimming and beekeeping. So basically
swimming and beekeeping. There's a bit of a distance there. One's water and one's not. Tell us about your swimming and beekeeping.
Yeah, well, I've been a swimmer for my whole life. I was a competitive swimmer. Now I'm just a fun swimmer. But I swam all through growing up in club swimming and then university swimming. And it was when I was in university swimming that I really started to just realize that it was my passion. Kind of through club swimming, it was still my choice, but my parents got me into it to start. And then I kind of, you go through phases, of course, up and downs. And university was when I really realized that this is what I love. I just love being in the water. I love the atmosphere. I love the culture, the team environment. And so that was kind of like the highlight. But I also had a lot of back pain in university and realized that I had scoliosis, and that kind of scared me when I learned about it. But now I know it's very common and it doesn't have to be a scary thing. So what I did for that is instead of really driving hard in the weight room, which I was pretty good at, I focused a little bit more on therapeutic exercise. And that's when I got into Pilates. So somebody introduced me to Pilates, and that kind of really helped get my deep inner core stronger, so that those outside muscles, when they were doing their thing, everything was more supported. And that really changed my trajectory. That's kind of when I realized that I wanted to really use Pilates in the rehab realm, which is what I was wanting to get into. So I was studying kinesiology. I was deciding between physio and occupational therapy. And then I decided occupational therapy with Pilates. So I wanted to get that whole person approach, really focusing on all the aspects that a person has in their life. And so that's why I got into OT. And while I was in occupational therapy school, we were given the opportunity to go basically wherever we wanted on field work. So we had 1,000 hours of clinical placement. And I said, I kind of want to go to Australia. Well, I've always wanted to go to Australia. Let's see if I can get in. So I applied, and then I was allowed the opportunity to go and self-initiate a placement. So that means that I actually reached out and connected to the places that I searched for. So I basically just searched online occupational therapy and Pilates in Australia, and just happens that Perth is the best for that in the country and probably in the world. So I think I'm in the best place that I could be. Just great opportunities. And now I'm actually working at the clinic that I was doing my clinical placement in. So that's how I got back here. The beekeeping is another side track, but beekeeping is what got me into WA during the pandemic. So during the lockdowns, but basically when they opened the borders and people were able to get in on a travel exemption, I had I've always been a beekeeper with my mom since 2015. And that was my way in because they needed beekeepers. It's considered essential. And so that's what I did. The first year that I was here, I was a commercial beekeeper. But now I'm doing a little bit of everything, a little bit of Pilates, a little bit of occupational therapy, a little bit of beekeeping, and a lot of swimming in the ocean. So I'm living my best life, Leigh, honestly.
Wow, you're a role model. People go, what, this woman? She's a superwoman. Wait till you see her
No.
swim, folks. She's a bloody superwoman, all right? I can tell you that.
No.
So let's just go back. Tell us, when you say kinesiology, what is kinesiology, that area of study? Tell us a bit about that.
I think maybe you call it exercise science. It's just this, but kinesiology is the study of human movement. So it's, basically what there's biomechanics, there's rehab. So it's a lot of like musculoskeletal stuff. So that's kinesiology.
Right.
Don't remember what I learned in kinesiology.
Did Pilates, did they teach Pilates at uni, or that was outside of uni? Yeah.
That was outside of uni. So it was honestly, it was like having avocado toast before avocado toast was cool. I was like interested in Pilates before it was actually popular, especially in Canada. I don't think it is even at the level that it is now, but it was really one therapist who told me to do it. He mentioned that I could be focusing a little bit more on my core stabilization and doing some Pilates as an add-on to the exercises that I was doing. And so that's when I started doing it myself. But then when I was in occupational therapy, my master's, I was living in Toronto and I was living nearby a Pilates studio that did teacher training. And I thought, oh, this is just perfect. I'll just get them both done at the same time, because that's what I really wanted to do, is just combine the two. So I did my mat training and my reformer teacher training while I was in my master's. And then after my master's finished, there was a period of time where I was kind of stuck in Canada. This was during the lockdown. And I was just trying to improve my learning and trying to get confident integrating the Pilates into the clinic setting, and kind of just marrying the two. And I did a diploma of clinical Pilates, and that was online with a company in Melbourne. So I kind of wanted to just like see if I can learn some tips and tricks from the Aussies. And then I was listening to Australians every day and kind of motivated me to get here even more. So that's kind of my education story.
Fantastic. And let's just talk Pilates for a second, because I was introduced to it about 2014, 2015. One of the guys in my water polo team was raving about how valuable it was. And so we, about 3 or 4 of us, started training at the Pilates studio over in Wembley Downs a couple of times, 2 or 3 times a week. And I was always getting a sore shoulder after every water polo training session. And because I'd go to the gym every 2 or 3 times a week, plus swim and plus do water polo, but my right shoulder, my shooting shoulder was always sore after every session. And the person running the studio said, you're not doing the reverse, you're doing all this, whatever this movement is, but not the other way. So we did a whole lot. And literally since then, I've continued to do those exercises. But what I found was doing the Pilates, and again, as I got a master's degree in phys ed, but I was never exposed to it in my own study, was how fantastic it was, not only in terms of preventing the injury or that soreness, but how it helped my swimming. So tell us a bit about the history that you know of Pilates and the power and the value of that spring situation.
Oh, yeah, good question. Well, Joseph Pilates, he was a pretty cool man. I don't know the exact details of the history, but it was the 1800s, and he was making these, he made these beds, and they were for soldiers during the war. I'm not going to say all the details because I'm going to mess something up. But his idea was really rehab, and he has an interesting background. He was a gymnast. He has a dancing background, a little bit of bodybuilding. He posed for some textbooks or something, but he was a pretty cool guy, and obviously very smart and ahead of his time. And the principles of Pilates are really about centering and core control and, the breath and the awareness and that mind-body connection. And so it's a very unique form of exercise. It's not just focusing on those external muscles. I actually just heard somebody say it today. They said, I used to only do beach weights. And I was like, oh, cool. You did weights at the beach. That's awesome. And he was like, no, I mean like weights that make you look good at the beach. And I was like, oh, okay. But like just learned that today. So that's what people usually focus on in the gym, which is fine. It's great, but there's a lot more to it. And I think there's a lot more that you can get out of exercises when you have that mindful connection, with the breath and the posture and the just like biomechanical efficiency. And we're trying to get efficient movements, but also, working the whole body. So whenever we do, you're talking about the springs. So the springs is, I think you're referring to the reformer, which is the machine. Yes. Yeah, so we use the reformer. Those are the more popular classes nowadays. I think there's a reformer studio on every corner. So they're not hard to find, but essentially it just allows you to modify like the tension and get into some fun positions for strengthening and also getting that length to tension relationships. We want the muscles to be lengthened and contract as well. So we want that optimal ability to strengthen in the lengthened position and also some very functional movements as well. Like we do footwork, which is lying down on your back. So it's very supported, but you're doing like it's basically a squat lying down. And what that essentially allows for a practitioner or a therapist or a Pilates instructor is to be able to modify the activity to suit the person in front of you. So I was just teaching a mums and bubs class. So that's a whole nother area. That's a lot of fun. The babies running around everywhere. But there's also older adults and just people that have certain injuries. You can really use the equipment to help strengthen the whole body, strengthen other areas while gradually building back the strength in that area that is injured or a little bit behind, has more potential. So that's kind of where the reformer I think came to be, is just a lot of rehab, and that's why I love using it in that setting, but also just for anybody wanting to get strong and have fun and have like different movement experiences. If they're tired of going to the gym, some people enjoy going to the gym, which is awesome, and it's good to do, a mix of both. I have nothing against any kind of movement. You'll probably figure that out. I love all movements, and I don't think any movement is bad, but like you mentioned with the shoulder, you had a lot of going forward flexion, and then you wanted to get the back strengthened as well so that it was a bit more balanced. So that's kind of what I love about Pilates. It's very, very balanced.
Just like you.
I don't know about that. I don't know much about
except when I'm chasing you in the water, then you're going like a mad machine.
And I'm more scared when you start growling at me.
I'm just a marshmallow. Carleen.
Well, I thought you had a really nice voice when I was listening to your podcasts. And then when I hear you yelling at everybody to get in the water, this is a completely different person.
It's all show business. I'm just a different character in different places, mate.
You are.
So a couple of things there. I mean, as I say, that year I did the we were going to Budapest to play water polo in the World Masters. I literally swam my best ever Rottnest swim around. It was like a 1,600 meter race. And I just felt the strength through the complete range of motion was different. The work with the springs really helped, because we know people use barbells, they use pull down machine, lat pull down, Nautilus, but I do think there's something different about that range of motion using the spring. How that I think Nautilus equipment tried to try and keep an equal amount of pressure all the way through the range, but I do think the spring does it even better, in my humble opinion. And you'll see me before every session, I'm using my band, and then people, my mate sees me before water polo games. You're doing that wrong, Leigh. You're doing it wrong. So I don't care. I'm doing it. At least I'm doing it. This guy wants me to do it perfectly. He's an architect and just thinks he's an amateur physiotherapist, but at least I'm doing it. Whereas and that's what I'm telling the young guys in water polo and the girls, please get to training 15 minutes earlier and do the rubber band work. There's a woman called Maggie Steffens, who is one of the best female water polo players in the world with the US team. And I watched a video one day, and she was talking to young girls, and she said, if only I had done the band work earlier, I don't think I would have had as many shoulder injuries. And of course, now you go on video on YouTube and see so I've put all the kids onto those band work videos for that very reason, let alone what it does in terms of helping with your passing and your shooting. But I note also Ronaldo, the one of, if not the world's, between him and Messi, but certainly Ronaldo, one of the best in the world. He's a nutcase for Pilates. I see regularly him doing Pilates work, and I hear him talking about core strength. So someone certainly got into his head around the power and the value of Pilates. And I'm sure there's a whole range of other world-class. I know that Dustin Martin, one of those great footballers in Melbourne, plays for Richmond, a superstar player. I see him doing Pilates, So just on it, give me 3 famous athletes that use Pilates that you think it might be one of the secrets of their success. I'm just putting you on the spot now.
Yeah, no, you really did, because I don't think I know of any. No, but I do know the Barbie cast. They did Pilates to get
ready.
Barbie.
All right. Well, that's good. The cast from Barbie did Pilates. What's his name? What was the guy's name? I mean, I know I was the Australian Maggie. What's her name? Margot Robbie.
Yeah.
And the guy, what's his name? That guy?
Ryan. Yeah.
Right. So he was in good nick so he obviously did something to look pretty good in that movie.
Yeah. Apparently it was Pilates.
He had to get his shirt off, so he had to go do the work. So let's talk about pelvic floor. And you've given me all these questions I should ask. So because we were this came about because we were talking about you were about to run a course on pelvic floor somewhere. And I went, what the heck? I know years ago we had a series of aerobics videos that we made down at the university that I made. I can't remember. I sent you create a nightmare if I sent you videos of it. Did I send those to you or not?
No? Wait, which one was that?
The aerobics videos. Leigh,
no.
Okay,
you sent me a lot of videos that I had to erase from my memory, but that wasn't one of them.
You're very funny. But I was with a mate of mine's wife was a specialist in physiotherapy and exercise for women about to have babies. What do we call that? Pregnancy, I suppose it's pregnancy. But we started to put a video together on it. And then someone said, mate, if someone actually has an accident and then they blame you. So he didn't continue with it. But I did get an appreciation at that point of the importance of pelvic floor exercises. So let's talk about this. Tell me about, do you want to share any slides or pictures to show people about this? Well, I could share the screen and you could even, if you wanted to.
I don't have any well, basically what I was getting ready for a few weeks ago, I had an in-service and I was talking to my colleagues at the clinic that I work at. So I work at a clinic in Fremantle, Next Wave Therapy. It's a wonderful clinic. It's got a physiotherapist, myself, an occupational therapist, and an occupational therapist who does naturopathy. And so it's just a very well-rounded, we take a holistic approach, and it's a multidisciplinary team. So we just learn off of each other a lot. And so we once a month have these in-services where we teach each other about what we know best.
Fantastic.
So I got to talk about the pelvis.
Well, let's just go. I'm going to just search online pelvic floor.
Well, I have a model.
Okay. Hang on. I'll show us the model.
Okay. All right. Are you ready?
Well, I'm going to just, what you want to, where is it?
In my hand.
Oh boy, you have a model, all right.
Yeah.
Is that a male pelvis or a female pelvis?
This is a female pelvis.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's theoretically wider.
Yes, it is theoretically wider, and it's wider, and it has the uterus inside. So
that makes a difference. Yes. Okay.
That's the giveaway, to be honest. Yeah, in this position. Yeah.
So tell us about this. I can see it. No problems. So where are the pelvic floor muscles, and why would we bother exercising them?
Good question. So we have the hip bones in the front. These are the ones that you can feel when you palpate the front of your hips, the bony ones.
So palpate's a very professional term. Yes, palpate. Yes.
Touch. Yeah.
Yes. No, palpate. Good. I get it. Yeah.
Okay. And then the hip bone, or sorry, the bones in the front, the pubic bones, those are the ones that you can feel basically if you were doing a zipper up in the front, the lowest.
And your abdominal muscles are attached to the top of that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. They go all the way up to the ribs. And so this is basically the pubic bone is what we consider to be the front of the pelvic floor. And then this is turning it upside down. So this is looking up from upside down. These are the two sitting bones.
Yeah.
And then on the back, there's your tailbone. So
the coccyx.
The coccyx, yeah. So the base of your spine.
Mm-hmm,
so basically when you're sitting down, we're looking down from your head if we're looking at it like this. And
there's a lot of gravitational force on that pelvic floor, yeah?
Yeah, there is, and a lot of pressure, air pressure as well. So from the bottom, you can see that these muscles, these red muscles, are continuous from the pubic bone to the tailbone in the back, and then side to side with the sitting bones. It's kind of, you can almost think of it as like a diamond shape, because that's kind of what it is. And from the top, we can see that it really holds in the organs that are directly above. So for the people who couldn't see that, essentially the pelvic floor is a group of muscles that sits on the base of the pelvis. And it has 5 main functions, and we just say that there are 5 S functions. But the first function is support. So it's the support for the organs above. So for females, it's the bladder, uterus, and rectum. And then for the males, it's the same, except you swap the uterus for the prostate. And then that's the support. So we've got the muscles on the base holding all those
all together.
And then the other function is stability. So that's that core function, the core support. So essentially the base of the pelvis is the base of the core. So it's the floor of the core. So we have the diaphragm, that's the top. So it's basically a group of 4 muscle groups. So we've got the diaphragm on the top, we've got the pelvic floor on the bottom, and then there's a special abdominal muscle that's transversus abdominis that kind of wraps around the body like a corset. And then some muscles that go all the way up the spine, those are called the multifidus muscles. And so they go all the way up the spine. So those 4 main muscle groups are what make up the core. And it's basically a really beautiful system. It's not one of the superficial muscles. You can't see it working, but it works beautifully with the breath. So it's actually an involuntary system that responds to breath and pressure. And I can get into that a little bit more. So it's a response to breathing. So we've said support, we said stability, and another one is sphincteric function. So it acts to prevent leakage, so leakage of urine and feces. And then there's sexual component to it. So we always just say there's no normal amount of pain. So if there's pain with intercourse, that's not a normal thing. And same with the previous point, which was leakage. There's no normal amount of leakage. And just because something could be common doesn't necessarily mean that it's normal, and don't mean that in a shameful way. It's just something that we could be aware of, that there are things that you can do to prevent. It's not something you have to live with. And that's pretty important. And then the last function is that it's a sump pump. So it basically, because it's skeletal muscle, it helps with circulation, pumping the blood around and moving fluid around. So those are the main functions. So it's a very important group of muscles. It has lots of different functions, but because there's so many different functions and there's lots of factors, there's some things that can interfere with its ability to function properly. So that's kind of why we need to do a thorough assessment of if somebody is having any pelvic health concerns. We do a thorough assessment because we really never know what is going on until we really dive deep into that person's life, really just unpacking all the things that are impacting their ability to carry out their daily activities. Because there's really nothing that you can do without the help of your pelvic floor. So we really need it for everything. We need it to be functioning properly in order to, hold in urine when you're sneezing, coughing, laughing. And it's there to support us all the time. And it's a dynamic muscle. So it responds to all the things that we do, including breath. I'm pretty not obsessed, but I really love the idea of breathing. And that's because it's an involuntary response and we don't need to think about doing it, but it's something that can really change so many different systems in our body when we start to think about it. So even just changing the type of breath that you're having or your posture, it can really change, your mental clarity. It can change just your nervous system as a whole. We can completely change from being in a sympathetic state, which is that fight or flight, to a parasympathetic state, which allows us to be more calm and relaxed. And so that's something that we can change in a minute, and it's very overlooked. I think a lot of times we don't accept that can be a very simple way of managing our health. The culture that we live in is kind of like quick fixes. And so I really like to think about things more from a more holistic, natural, simple way. And so that's kind of where we usually start, is with breathing, posture and breathing. So yeah, I just rambled on a lot.
Posture and breathing. I like it. And I hadn't thought of the pelvic floor muscles helping with that, the diaphragm and the breathing, as you say. So I imagine that they've got to kind of work together. When the diaphragm goes down, I imagine the pelvic floor's kind of got to go down as well. There's got to be movement there. And as you say, the other side is that leakage thing. I know members of my family, eventually the pelvic floor is weak. If they laugh too much, they'll wet their pants. There's no doubt about it. Now, I imagine that's embarrassing. So, and of course, women and men, let's just talk about that for a second, because is it a guy problem as well? Or tell me the difference between men and women. Obviously the guys don't have uterus, as you say, there's prostate and stuff in there. What's the difference, and what do they do about it?
So there is not a whole lot of difference. The fact that we both have the same pelvic floor muscles. We have 3 layers of muscles, just the external genitalia, very different. And there are different conditions for men's pelvic health and women's pelvic health. But I think the most important thing is that the impact is the same. And so what is so distinct about pelvic health is the emotional component. So you have the physical issue, whatever it is, if it's leakage, if it's pain or pressure related to either bladder or pelvic function, you have that psychosocial component that comes along to it, so that there's an embarrassment, maybe fear, shame, not wanting to talk about what you're going through. And so kind of that just reserve. And so I think that there is not really difference in the openness about the topic. So women's health and pelvic health, so pelvic health for women in general is very under discussed. And like you said, some of your family members, like we all know somebody who maybe has to cross their legs when they're laughing or something, and they just kind of brush it off, or maybe even joke it off, which it's that narrative is okay for a time being, right? But it's not going to be helpful in the long term if we don't actually address what's happening. And it can be addressed with certain techniques and strategies, and looking at the whole person and seeing what it is that's causing those issues. But this is pretty cool, not cool, but when we think back to the Latin nerve, the root of the word pudendal, which is the nerve that feeds the pelvic floor, the main nerve, it actually stems from the word pudendum, which is parts to be ashamed of.
Really?
Yeah. So like even going way back, it's just kind of like rooted in shame and just that kind of like taboo area. we don't see it, and that's why a lot of us aren't even aware of it. And if we are aware of it, maybe just not wanting to talk about it. So if you have pain there, or even, for example, like pelvic organ prolapse could be an issue for some women. And no, if you've had a surgery or some kind of pelvic or abdominal surgery, you're not just going to openly bring it up with your friends and family. It's just not something like at a Christmas dinner, or somebody would talk about their shoulder pain easily, but you're not going to talk about the pelvic pain. And so with men and women both, there's some stats that I learned, and it was, I believe 1 in 3 women have pelvic pain at some point in their life, and 1 in 6 men have pelvic pain at some point in their life. But the percentage of practitioners who treat men with pelvic pain is very, very low. So I think about 17% of practitioners that call themselves pelvic health specialists actually treat men, and it's nothing to do with the practitioner. And from so far, I've only worked with women, and it just has to do with the education and the knowledge, and just the openness to treating men, and then also the gender. So most people who treat pelvic health happen to be women. So you get that kind of separation. Maybe a man won't want to go see a woman for their pelvic health concerns because of, that the socio-cultural factors, and not wanting to expose that vulnerability. And there's just that trust and feeling comfortable opening up. So those are the barriers or the reservations for men going to seek pelvic health would be first of all, the awareness and the knowledge about where to go, and then also the shame, and then just lack of support from male practitioners. So I think in physio school right now, one of my physio colleagues said that they're really recruiting, like they're just saying, as you're leaving physio school, just consider, if you're a male, consider a master's in pelvic health for men, because that's, it's a gap that for sure needs to be addressed, because all about mental health for sure. And this is something that has a really just inherently is very, it really impacts mental health. So
about the P's, there is that you said pain and something. What are those 4 P's there you're talking about in terms of dysfunction?
Yeah, so dysfunction could be pain and pressure, and then any kind of incontinence. So that would be urinary or fecal incontinence. And so those are the areas of dysfunction, things that can be not working optimally with the pelvic floor and or with the bladder. So those are things that are kind of like flags. So if you're having any kind of incontinence, so no amount of incontinence is normal. And we say, even though it is common, so 1 in 3 women have some kind of incontinence. So it is very common, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it is normal. And it could be very uncomfortable. It could be really impacting their ability to, do their normal things. Sometimes it can really greatly impact the ability to exercise. So women might be avoiding exercise, going to the gym, and we all know how exercise makes us feel so much better. So that's very important to address. And even just like bending up to pick up your kids, that could be causing you a lot of stress. And we don't want these things to be just brushed off and considered to be normal, because they can definitely be addressed. And then with pain, as I mentioned before, any kind of pain with intercourse is not a normal sensation, and it should be addressed as well. And then the other one was pressure, and that's basically what I was talking about with the core systems, and you nailed it. The diaphragm, when we take a breath in, that diaphragm flattens and contracts, so it flattens down, and that increases the pressure within the abdomen. So intra-abdominal pressure increases. The pelvic floor responds to that pressure by relaxing and lengthening and lowering down. So it's that response to pressure. And then on our exhale, there's kind of a recoil. The pelvic floor lifts and contracts, and that contraction is really supportive contraction. So it supports the organs above and support the spine. And then we get that kind of balance in pressure. So as the diaphragm is going back up, the pelvic floor is lifting. And that's why it's really important to have, first of all, optimal alignment, rib cage over pelvis, and then optimal breathing strategies. So that's why when we're doing a lift at the gym, it's always exhaling during the exertion. It's just to make sure that there's that pressure balance. We're not overloading the system. And because when you think about bracing strategies, and actually a lot of women might think about the sucking in or the bracing the abdomen just to look a little bit skinnier, that strategy actually puts a lot more pressure on the pelvic floor. So you think about if you were to squeeze a balloon, you've got the pressure going up or down. So if you get that pressure going down, that can put a lot of extra pressure on the pelvic floor that it would need to either respond by lengthening, or if it's short and tight, then it's going to just be very painful. So we can get things such as pelvic organ prolapse, which is basically when the support from underneath is not sufficient enough, and then you get that lowering a descent of the organs through the openings. So that can be very uncomfortable, as you can imagine.
Boy.
Yeah. So
that's terrible.
The idea is to really optimize the balance of pressure from the diaphragm, the pelvic floor, and then to just make sure we have a system that can respond to the changes in pressure. So the pelvic floor can relax and lengthen when it needs to, and it can shorten and contract when it needs to as well. And just that really dynamic system, because when we get those two different kinds of muscle tension that are not very ideal, we've got a loose muscle, which is not a strong muscle, and then we've got a short and tight muscle, which is also not a strong muscle. So people might think that because a muscle is tight, it's strong. It's actually not the case, because we want that muscle to have that optimal length and tension relationship. It needs to be able to lengthen and shorten in response to whatever we need it to be able to do. So just being able to, identify what it is that person might be experiencing. Is it that tight, overactive pelvic floor? That's kind of what we call it hypertonic, so extra tension. And that can contribute to pain and dysfunction in a similar way that a loose and weak pelvic floor can contribute to pain and dysfunction. But there's very different things that we would do for both. So
let's talk about that. What are some exercises or solutions that you'd recommend? And you put here something about Kegel, and everyone be doing it. So is there a relationship between solution and Kegel? But give us, what are some things people can do?
Yeah, so the Kegel, have you heard of Kegel?
Never heard of it.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, I guess it is a person, but all the women in the world.
It's not a beer, it's not a cheese, it's not a food, it's something.
It's a pelvic floor exercise. So it's basically,
no.
Yeah. So if you ask any women, they'll know what a Kegel is, but basically it's that they would say, imagine like you're holding in urine. So you're stopping the stream of urine, and that's kind of the lift that you would feel.
I'm doing it now as we speak, Carleen. You're getting me practicing.
Is it working?
Well, so far so good. I think my pants are okay. Yeah. So,
okay.
So what do? You sit there and you're pretending to hold it in. How long do you do that for? A day, half a day, an hour, 10 minutes? How long?
That's part of the problem, is that nobody knew how long to do it for, how many to do it, how many to do, even if you're doing it properly as well. So if you think you're doing the Kegel properly, you may be doing it properly, or you may not be.
Well, how do you know? What do you do? Measure it? Is there some measuring device?
Yeah, there are measuring devices, and the pelvic floor physiotherapists are skilled in internal assessment. So they're actually able to do an assessment of the pelvic floor muscles from the inside, because that's the only way you can know. So you can't see the pelvic floor. No. So we have no idea what's happening. You can't measure the force unless there's an internal assessment. So we don't really know. And then another way of measuring it is ultrasound. So that's what I use in my clinic, because I don't have the internal skills, but we can do what's called biofeedback externally. We put the ultrasound
You can do that on men and women, of course, but the internal assessment, you can't do that with blokes, can you? Or can you?
No, you would do it from the back. So that's why
Really?
yeah. So it can be done.
It's bad enough getting a prostate examination, let alone please test how good my pelvic floor muscles are, doctor.
Yeah.
Far out.
So I guess you can kind of see why that it's avoided.
Well, I'm getting a bit tense in that area now that you mentioned that.
But so it's a very vulnerable assessment, and it doesn't need to be done that way. So we don't need to do
very vulnerable. Yes.
Yeah. So you can just
imagine. My eyes are getting watery just thinking about it.
It needs to be a comfortable and safe space before you can get to that.
Oh, part. I'd agree with that. Comfortable and safe space, indeed.
Definitely.
Don't try it down the beach. Don't try this at home, folks.
Definitely not a beach activity. No, it's definitely behind.
Think of the sand alone, for goodness sake. Don't want that.
The thing with Kegels and that exercise of lifting from the pelvic floor, because it has that lift. Because one of the muscles is actually called levator ani, so it actually has that like lift. It implies lifting. So it's not just a bearing down or a bracing. Some people think that their Kegel needs to be a bracing, but it's actually has a
lift.
Yeah, and it's a gentle lift as well. So it's very.
Well, I hope you don't just talk about it. I hope you do these yourself.
Of course I do.
When do you do it? In the morning, at night, at lunchtime, just walking around the street? When?
Oh, no, I'm just kidding. Not all the time. But the thing is that not everybody needs to work on these Kegels because, for example, the person that has the overactive or the hypertonic, really tense and tight pelvic floor muscles, that would just really would probably contribute. It would probably make it more painful. So they actually need to learn to relax those pelvic floor muscles. So the whole thing with Kegels is that, although they could be beneficial for some people, not necessarily for everybody. So that's the thing with pelvic floor training, is that there's no one size fits all. And we really need a thorough assessment of the whole person. It's a biopsychosocial approach. So we look at the person, the
biopsychosocial. I like that. You can charge a lot of money for that kind of thing. I like that. Biopsychosocial. I like that.
Yeah, it's a really great term. It's the whole. So you got the bio, the purse, like the actual physical components, and the psychosocial components. Are you writing this down?
Yes, of course.
Okay, good. Yeah.
I like to make notes in case I remember. Because I've noticed Pilates, pelvic floor, whole person approach, pelvic health, and now biopsychosocial approach. I like that.
Okay. I'm glad I taught you a new word.
No, I'm going to try that within Pod Squad, our swimming group. I'm going to try a biopsychosocial. We kind of do a bit of bio and psychosocial, but we can go further, I think. We can go further. There's certain male members of our squad that need some far more intense pelvic floor education. Andy, Murph in particular, they need it.
It was funny this morning, finding out who knows about pelvic floor, what the pelvic floor is, and it was actually interesting. The one other woman that was there said, "Oh, it's the hips, right?" And so we've just identified that it's not just men who are not aware.
It's the hips.
Yeah,
it's something. It's around the hips. That's right.
Well, she was a trained engineer, so she's way better.
Yeah. Well, if you start talking stress factors. Carleen, as you say, this is even the word comes out of shame, as in you just stuff we don't talk about. So there's a whole lot of great information we've spoken about in here today, and you're coming back to the power of breath, which again, as I've said to you guys, we did a Vedic meditation course at the weekend, and the whole area when I immerse myself in kind of Buddhism and Sadhguru and other things, and having a master's degree in physical education, sports science, breath we thought was just something you did when you were running and huffing and puffing or swimming, but the Indians have known for thousands of years, but as you've said, breathing, slowing down that sympathetic nervous system, and I say these days 3 breaths you can change your world. Just 3 breaths, let alone what you're saying is controlling, and the breath is actually also dealing with pelvic floor in terms of whether it be tension or relaxation. depending on what the problem is. So it's super, super interesting. Where you take it. So how do you, well, first of all, I'm not winding up, but people get in touch with you via the clinic you're at right now. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I work at Next Wave Therapy. It's in Fremantle. And if you're at all just curious, we're actually doing free 15-minute consultations. So it's a pelvic health check. So just come in.
What, invasive, non-invasive?
I
was going to say.
Non-invasive. So
you're
this
going to get a whole lot of people going and others running away.
It's kind of whatever you want to get out of it.
Free pelvic health check, I'm there.
It's pants on, definitely pelvic health.
It's a pants on pelvic for 50. You pay a lot more if you're going to get your pants off. I get it. Okay, that makes complete sense.
It's completely different. Yeah. So this is
pants on. That's another term. BioPsychosocial Approach. Pants on pelvic health check. Introductory check. Yeah.
Introductory check. Yeah. Just what are you curious about? Just starting the conversation, really. We can do the external exam. We can do that biofeedback with the ultrasound. And there's a pelvic health questionnaire that we kind of just identify a very brief overview. And it's just a way to get clients to feel comfortable, and it's not nearly enough time to gain that rapport and that feeling of trust and comfort. So it's just to start the conversation, really, and see where you're at.
Yes. Well, we say in business and in sales, prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. So prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. You must diagnose before you prescribe. So of course you have to do some kind of diagnosis. But let's talk about Carleen for a second, because I'm interested in leading your best life. And so one of the things I like to ask people is, what books are you reading? What books are you reading right now?
So the last book that I fully read was Atomic Habits. I'm currently reading a book, but you're going to be very disappointed by this. I've probably been reading it for 2-3 months because I just get...
Sounds like a struggle. Puts you to sleep, does it?
It just
hypnotic.
I think it's the time. So what I've done, my days revolved around my values, of course, and reading hasn't been one of them lately because I call my family in the evening, and that's kind of our time. So that's also the time that I said, based on the Atomic Habits book that I read, I was like, I'm going to make a habit of reading in the evening, but then it just didn't align with what I was already doing. So I stopped reading. But
well, we do the things that we get the most pleasure from. So speaking to your family clearly gives you more reward than reading a book. But you've given me a roundabout way to go. Okay, Atomic Habits is a fantastic book. I've read that. What else? So the book you're wading your way through like molasses. What is it?
It's Outlive. So
I've heard of that. In fact, somebody, Shane's brother gave him that book. Shane was reading that the other day. I saw. Yeah,
it's all about living longer, healthier, happier. So it's
your age, you're not that living long is a long way away. Like
my
age.
I like to do educational books and podcasts that I can bring into my practice as an occupational therapist. So I feel like I pick up little bits and pieces, and then I want to live forever so I can swim in the ocean every day.
Good idea. Did you watch that one on Netflix, Blue Zones, where they talk about where are people living to 100 years of age and being healthy? Okay, talking about longevity. It's very good. It's called Blue Zones. And they go Okinawa and a whole range of other places. What are the common factors? And it's very good, not the least of which is activity. In Okinawa, the Japanese in particular sit down on the floor. So they're getting down, bending up. So as distinct from, sitting in a chair all day. Whereas I think one of the islands, Sardinia or somewhere, they're living on very steep mountainsides. So the people are like walking up almost a mountain to go from their home to church or the local shop. So that's you with books. So let's just give us your day, because I know that you come swimming with us most every second day or thereabout. What is your day? What does your day look like? Your routine? Because we say, excellence is a habit. We are what we repeatedly do. So what are some things you repeatedly do in terms of living your best life?
I wish I could swim every morning. That would be the ideal. And I like to start the day like that, getting into the ocean first thing in the morning and being with a group of people that just bring out the best in you or the worst. And then, having that social aspect first thing in the morning, I just found that to be the best way to wake up and to start the day with a positive start. And then I either teach my Pilates usually in the morning teaching Pilates, and then in the afternoon either teaching another shift of Pilates or doing my occupational therapy at Next Wave Therapy. So I kind of have a very diverse day, and then always, like I mentioned, talking to my family, letting them know how I am, learning about their day and what they're about to get up to, always talking to my mom. And right now it's fun because our beekeeping is kind of overlapping. Well, she's wrapping up the season, but this is a busy season for beekeeping, and I'm always teaching courses on the weekend, trying to convince everybody else to start beekeeping. We just have a chat in the evening, and then I try to do that without looking at my screen. So I'm trying to, be better at not having the screens at night, because I did find that to be very impactful, is just turning off the screens after, before about 2 hours before going to sleep. So that's why I'm not staring at the screen. I have it either on black and white, or we're just talking on the phone. And then just relaxing before going to sleep, and then starting the day. Oh, one thing that I did start doing is, instead of writing down, just like for my journaling a little bit, instead of writing down what I'm going to do the next day, I write down something that I've accomplished, because I feel like you can get so caught up in going through the motions and getting to the next part, and you kind of lose sight of what you have accomplished and what it took to get there. So even if it's something as simple, I just write it down, like went into the ocean today, because if I were to tell myself that I was going to be going into the ocean every day, if I were to tell myself that 5 years ago, I would have been like, whoa, that's awesome. Doubt it. But now I appreciate those things, and I haven't been doing that for too long, but I've noticed that it's making me feel a lot more just better. And I think it's a great way to acknowledge what you're getting done, in addition to keeping on top of everything else.
Correct. Excellent. Two things. One, I'm thinking, have you done any meditation of any kind? Do you do any meditation of any kind?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I used to really struggle with meditation. I used to just think, because I had a few concussions and then a lot of anxiety around like returning to sport from those concussions. And I tried meditation and just...
Concussions from swimming training?
Yeah, when people forget the direction they're going in the lane and they push off into your head.
Oh, really? That'll do it. Yes.
I know. Yeah. And then I think having a lot of like anxiety and performance anxiety around sport, and trying to, always get back. I was trying to get back too soon, kind of thing, and setting myself back. And but with that, I thought, I should try to, start some meditation practice, and just got frustrated with it, which I think a lot of people do, because they kind of misinterpret the fact that you notice your thoughts and you shouldn't be thinking. That's what you're thinking, is that you shouldn't be thinking, but what we think all the time, there's no way to stop thinking, but it's just how you respond to those thoughts and just notice them, and kind of like, leaves on a stream as they're passing through, just noticing them as they are. They're just thoughts. And I think it's very helpful. I have been starting to really think about how, the thoughts are making your physiology change, like how your response is if you feel upset stomach, and then you just, really sit back and say, oh, that was a thought that caused that response, and think about how that can have such a long-term negative impact if we just keep allowing our thoughts to have those physiological impacts on our bodies. I've been doing there's an app, the Waking Up is what I've been using. I know there's lots of different apps, and I like to just do a little bit.
When do you do that, in the evening or in the morning, or or during the day? When do you do that?
Usually during the middle of the day, because that seems to be when I have a little bit of a break between whatever I'm doing. So I just it's whenever I can fit it in, but usually in the middle of the day. And then usually trying to do it more like just sporadically, like as I'm transitioning from one thing to another, just kind of like checking in and just noticing a little bit more about the body. And I think when I talk about breath, I love breath because sometimes it's a good place to start. So if you're not comfortable doing a meditation practice because you're overthinking what you're thinking and that kind of thing, you can really just focus on one thing, and that's the breath. And you can really notice the change almost immediately. So when it's kind of like fits really well in our culture, we want that quick change or quick fix, instant gratification, if you will. So that's kind of just getting that that sense that something is changing, and you're noticing it. So that's the first step is just being able to notice that awareness. And then once we're aware of things, then we can make changes. So,
well, that's what we say. The breath brings you into the present moment. So why I use it in sport with the athletes. One or two breaths to slow everything down, to come back into the present moment. So if mistakes have occurred, we don't want your brain in the past, and we certainly don't want you racing ahead going, what if we win this, or what if we lose this? So the breath brings it back into the moment, which of course the Indians have been saying for 5, 10, 15,000 years, present moment awareness. How do you concentrate on that air coming into the nose? You can't be thinking about your mother, your father, the past, the future at that point. So it's such a powerful but simple thing to do. The other thing I want to touch on is honey and bees. This whole area of manuka honey, or the natural ingredient that heals. Because again, my mate Damien, who I told you about, who runs his Bee Central business up in 2J, literally he attributes his surviving cancer to the manuka honey reducing his tumor, and so he now grows it. But tell me a bit about your understanding of the prevention and or healing powers in honey.
I'm so glad you finally brought this to the bees, because I've been waiting. Well, it's my favorite thing to talk about, and I could talk forever about bees, so we'll just stick to honey. But the honey here, especially in Western Australia, is probably the best honey in the world, because it's all of the honey that I've, so my mom's company in Canada, and then here, Rupert Phillips, he runs the House of Honey in the Swan Valley. Yep. And the honey is raw and pure and unpasteurized. So it's very natural. There's been no, it hasn't been pasteurized, so it hasn't been heated. So if you heat it too much, then that destroys the properties, those like really beneficial properties that you're talking about. And basically in Western Australia, there's no pests and diseases. So there's no treatment to the honeybees or to the colony itself. So that makes the honey even more pure. And then the eucalyptus trees, such as jarrah, red gum, and karri, particularly jarrah, have what's called antimicrobial properties. So we measure it with a rating of, it's called the total activity rating, and it goes from 10 to 40. And it measures the ability for the honey to fight off bacteria. So they actually send the honey to a lab, put it in a petri dish, and measure the bacteria before and after. And then it comes out with that rating. So anything between 10 and 40 is amazing. Some of the honeys, like the jarrah honey here, can be even more than that, but it doesn't even read more than that. But it's just we can't say medicinal, but it definitely has the healing properties. It can heal wounds and soothe sore throats. And the darker the honey as well, the more antioxidants it has. So that's another thing. But yeah, the honey here in WA is really special. And I think it's amazing that the bees can stay strong all year round here as well. Like there's just so many different flower sources for the bees. And that's why it's been so much fun working with Rupert at the House of Honey, because we, for about a year, it was him and I just going around to all the different sites. He has 70 sites all across WA. So I got to see a lot of the country and learn a lot about the bush and just how vast and beautiful the WA bush is. I know I talk about the ocean. I love the ocean, but the bush is pretty amazing too. So the bees give us that beautiful product from the bush, and definitely has great properties.
Wow, you talk about an advocate for WA, honey. That's marvelous. So let's just go. Is there anything? I'm going to wrap up shortly, but is there anything I haven't asked you you'd like me to ask you that you'd like to cover before we go?
I think that we've pretty much covered a lot about pelvic health, and hopefully I haven't been overwhelming with information. But what I really want people to gather is that if you're experiencing any pelvic health concerns, first of all, you're not alone. And there are people that want to listen to you. We want to hear your story, and there are people that are wanting to help you. It is a journey that the practitioner and the client go on together. So it's kind of like a discovery, like if we're both being detectives, it's the client is a detective in their own body. They have that awareness in a compassionate sense of what's going on, and then the therapist will help just provide the tools and strategies that they can work into their daily life. So it's just starting with awareness and being an advocate for your own health, because it's important to feel good and live your best life, but also, it just starts with that understanding and awareness of what's going on.
Fantastic, Carleen. You're a superstar. And are you swimming in the morning or not?
Yes, I will be tomorrow morning.
Jeez, I've got to get myself ready for that.
Don't wear flippers again.
What's that?
Don't wear those flippers again.
Oh, they're like lead. I tried to offload them to you and you gave them back to me. That's great. So we've talked Pilates, pelvic floor, whole person approach, the BioPsychosocial approach, pelvic health, and the bees and the honey, the active ingredient. Carleen, thank you very much. Great sharing this, and we'll share this around, and I'll see you tomorrow morning, eh?
Sounds good. Thank you so much for letting me talk with you, Leigh. Enjoy.
My pleasure. See you soon, mate. Bye.
Bye.